It's the gaps between that usually get the most buildup. It's funny how there's so many analogies between dentistry and cleaning a guitar, but it's the same kind of thing. Hello once again, friends. Great to see you again. Welcome to the Guitar Foster Parent. I'm John McLain. Thanks for tuning in to the channel today in the continuation of our Harmony 2814 project. So we're taking this old Harmony and freshening it up a bit. We've done quite a few things to the guitar already, and today it's going to be all about cleaning and conditioning this old dirty fretboard. We've already addressed several things on the guitar. Last time we were together, you may recall, we put on these nice new Grover tuners on the end of the guitar, and today we're going to get this dirty fretboard addressed. We'll move on to that in just a moment. If you're new to us, welcome along. I'd like to encourage you to click the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and join us for our journey as we take old, unwanted instruments, freshen them up, give them a little personality, make them fun to play again, and then place them in a forever home where they'll be taken care of and played instead of languishing away in some closet, unloved and unplayed. That's the mission of the Guitar Foster Parent. Well, we acquired this Harmony 2814 from a collector who was looking to thin the herd, as it were. He recognized that this guitar was not getting played anymore, and so we took it in here and became its foster parent. Today, we're going to look at this dirty fretboard. You know, here's the thing about fretboards. When you play a guitar, your fingers, of course, have oils on them that are naturally occurring, and those oils help nourish your skin. But the problem is dirt sticks to those oils, and when you play a guitar, when you press your fingers against the strings, those strings act like squeegees, and they really scrape off dirt and oils and skin cells, and that stuff gets deposited right there on the fretboard. And if you begin to sweat, and you're always sweating to a degree, that just sticks that stuff right on the wood surface of your fretboard. Not judging, it happens to everyone, and in fact, most players very seldom if ever clean their fretboards. Some of the more disciplined players will give it a general cleaning every time they put on a new set of strings, but in general, most players will play their guitar and they'll hang it on the wall or put it back in the case, and no cleaning happens under the strings. And so today we're going to give this fretboard, which hasn't been cleaned, and you can see here in these close-up shots, there's some dirt here and there, and the typical pattern, you see this hourglass pattern, which is typically, you know, when your finger rubs against the actual fretboard, it kind of wipes some of that away. But in the gaps, you get those kind of hourglass shapes of grime. If you have a guitar that's been played at all, you've seen this. And it's a little bit gross, but it's not impossible to clean up. We'll need a few supplies. One thing we're going to use today is a dollar store toothbrush. And speaking of the dollar store, that's a great place to get these. Also, the ones that the dentist gives you, unless you use them for your teeth. I don't. I use one of those Sonic type toothbrushes, but save these because these are great for cleaning various things. This one is dedicated for fretboard cleaning. And of course, some common everyday cotton swabs, Q-tips, or what have you are great for detailed cleaning. And then you're going to need some kind of a conditioning fretboard oil. There are many different oils you can use. This one is from Music Nomad, but you want to find an oil designed for a fretboard that not only conditions, but also has a cleaning agent, special detergents built into the oil. And then, of course, some shop towels or paper towels or some kind of way to clean up some of the excess. Speaking of a toothbrush, cleaning a fretboard is much like the same process. We're going to moisten the area with some of the oil, and then we're going to use gentle pressure and circular motions to try and loosen and then remove a lot of this fretboard gunk and grime. It can be a tedious process, especially for fretboards that are quite dirty. This one actually isn't terrible. This fretboard has a few frets, most of the more commonly used frets, which are typically found again down around 2, 3, and 4, and then up around between 9 and 14. Those are the most commonly played frets on this guitar anyway, and that's where the most dirt is. Every time you touch this, it gets a little dirtier. We're going to get it all nice and cleaned up today. One thing I will mention, try to avoid using water. Again, water typically is not a great cleaning agent for wood. It's not the end of the world. The problem is that as you rub water into the fretboard, some of that water is going to find its way into the gaps where the frets sit. And what does water do to untreated wood? Well, it swells it up. And the wood, when they notch out the fretboards, when they put the frets in, the wood is most likely against the grain, and untreated water can soak into that and cause you problems. I've even seen some guitars where the frets will actually pop out of the slots because the fret slot in the fretboard has been altered by water. So water, not the best idea. Again, not the end of the world, and if you have to use water and some sort of degreasing mild detergent like Dawn or something like that, make sure you do everything you can to get it completely dry, but in most cases you're not going to be able to get it all out. Highly recommend a fretboard oil. It's not expensive. It lasts virtually forever. I mean, this little bottle will clean many fretboards, and it's just the right way to go. So try to avoid water if you can. Well, we've got all of our supplies. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start at one end. We'll start down by the nut. We'll check each fret, and we'll make our way down the fretboard. And again, I'm going to take my finger on the back of the toothbrush, and again, you're not going to want to press super hard. Let me see if I can get in and show you. There's no need to do this and mash the brush down. Again, it's just like brushing your teeth, just kind of a nice light circular. The idea is to loosen the grime, and then you can use your towels or some other Q-tips or what have you to wipe away the gunk, and then you just visually inspect by shining a light across it, and if those things look good, move on. When the fretboard is finished, more than likely, we'll just apply another good thick coating of this oil, let it soak in and condition the wood. This old guitar probably has never had its fretboard cleaned. Many guitars haven't. And as a result, this wood dries out, and sometimes it will look dull or maybe even it'll have a little oxidized look to it instead of kind of a lustrous kind of look that we want. And so we are definitely going to be oiling that up. One more note about fretboards before we begin our cleaning. Some fretboards, like this one, are unfinished, meaning there's no type of urethane or lacquer on the fretboard itself. It's just sanded wood. Other fretboards, many of them maple, like the jazz bass behind me, they do have a type of a sealant or urethane or lacquer on the front. Again, same process applies. You don't have to be quite as careful with those because the wood is sealed. But again, you just take the brush and with some gentle pressure, just make little circular motions and loosen and remove the grime. All right, got our toothbrush, got our oil and other supplies. Without further ado, let's show this fretboard some love. So once again, not rocket science here. We're going to apply some oil directly to the board or to the brush, either way, probably a little of both. And then we're just going to work this in. This oil is specially designed with some detergent additives that won't harm the wood, won't swell it up. It's oil after all. But there's some additives in there that will help to lift it up. Also, the grime up, that is. Also, this particular oil from Music Nomad, it's called F1 oil, claims to be petroleum and wax-free. Again, petroleum can dry out wood. Wax, not something you want on a fretboard that can build up and get on your strings or whatever. It's made out of natural oil. It's got a cleaning element to it, and it will protect as well. So again, invest in a good oil. There's a lot of different ones. This one from Music Nomad I've used. I like it. There's a lot of other ones, but invest in your guitar if you're going to be cleaning your fretboard, and get you some good fretboard oil. Without further ado, let's get going. One thing that I forgot to mention is that if you've ever wet mopped a floor, often what's helpful is to put a really heavy coating and let it soak for a little bit. That will help loosen some of the deposits. So I'm going to probably take this 5 frets at a time. So I'm going to move this up a little bit on the neck rest here and probably go up to 5 frets at a time, let it soak, do some scrubbing, wipe it off, and we'll see how it looks. Well, you can see I've kind of cleaned and thoroughly oiled. I put it on very heavy up to fret 5. Look at the difference between where it's been oiled and where it hasn't. See how lustrous it already looks? You can also see on the towel here some of the dirt that's come off. So what I like to do, notice how I blotted and didn't wipe. I will probably wipe a little later, but for now I want to leave a lot of that oil on. I'm just blotting some excess so that I can kind of see if I missed any dirt. It looks pretty clean. Maybe a little spot right here that I need to get a little better. So I'll do that. But just wanted to mention, blotting is good. You don't want to wipe that oil off because you can already see in many parts of this fretboard, it's soaking it up like a sponge. Wow, what a difference. Look how nice that fretboard's starting to look already. Well, I think I'm pretty satisfied with the first 5 frets. Let's move up to the next set. And I can already see some dirt, especially here, so I'm going to be paying special attention. And again, like brushing your teeth, it's the gaps between that usually get the most buildup. It's funny how there's so many analogies between dentistry and cleaning a guitar, but it's the same kind of thing. There's a lot of material up against the fret right here, and we're going to use the brush. One word of caution, I actually saw somebody do this one time. They actually took a sharp object, I think it was a pair of tweezers or something, to scrape this. Never ever do that. Remember, you use anything harder than wood, it's going to gouge and damage your fretboard. Again, these soft nylon bristles, safe as a kitten to use on here, and that's what you want to do. Let's move on to the next set. Okay, the next set is complete. I removed my fret rest. Don't really need it in this case. We're not really doing any heavy-duty work that needs to support the neck of the guitar here. You can see this is taking this build up off quite nicely. There's still a couple of areas along these problem spots right here. And again, these smaller strings, these smaller gauge strings, 1, 2, and 3, the ones that aren't wound especially, really have a tendency to scrape a lot of material off your fingers. Kind of gross, but it does happen. And so very often you'll find more buildup down in this area because that's really biting in and pulling material off of where your calluses are. So I'm going to do a little more work along here, and I don't know if you can see that right there. There's a close-up shot of it. We're going to try to get a little better and get some more of this material off. Now's a good chance to use a Q-tip to run along that area and see if any material comes off. Remember, the longer this oil sits, the more it's going to be able to loosen some of the debris that's on the fretboard. Some of that caked on oil and stuff can actually, it's again, use the tooth reference, it's a lot like tartar in some cases, but you never want to take a hook or anything and scrape it like your dentist does. You want to just take something soft, and I like to run it right along the frets, and you can see there's still some dirt coming off of there. And so we may want to work a little more, although visually I'm not really seeing much of anything. So I think we may, yeah, there's a spot right there I'm going to work on a little more. But again, this can be good for just some spot drying because, you know, the oil is shiny and sometimes it can mask some spots you might have missed. I see one right here and maybe a little bit right there. This area is looking pretty good, so we'll continue. All right, those frets look nice and clean now. I've inspected them closely. Notice, of course, that the fret of the grain, rather, of the wood on the fretboard will always run parallel to the neck itself. And so you may have noticed when I'm brushing, sometimes instead of a circle, Now, if I want to get a little more aggressive, I'll move with the grain. Moving this way isn't terribly helpful. Again, you're not going to damage the fretboard. That's the nice part about using this soft toothbrush. But a lot of times, kind of an oval with the grain like this will be pretty effective in getting some of the, and of course those stubborn areas, you might have noticed I was pressing a little more, getting those bristles down into the grain to loosen some of that stuff. Again, you're not going to hurt it, you're just going to wear out your toothbrush faster, but you know, at a buck a piece, who cares, right? Time to move on up the neck. All right, I did identify some dirtier areas up in some of these frets here, particularly around 13, 14, 15. Typically, unless you're Eric Clapton, you're not going to see a lot of dirt up in these frets toward the end of the neck. However, we will get this oiled for sure, but I don't see any dirt at all up here. Typically, like I say, these frets don't get touched a whole lot on a guitar like this. But we'll give it all a good oil, but you can just see the difference as this oil soaks into the frets down here that we've already cleaned. What a difference it makes. This is really a beautiful fretboard, but you'd never know it when it's all dirty and dry. Another thing the toothbrush is good for is getting the oil into all the little nooks and crannies. You can really use these bristles to work the oil all the way into where the fret slot is and all these little grain marks. Let's do a blotting here and see how we did on our dirt that we identified. Just kind of give it a light blotting, and any areas that we missed should appear as light shines across the fretboard. Wow, look how nice this looks now. I love doing this because it just seems like it just takes all the age and makes the fretboard look like new. It's so worth the work that you do to your guitar. You can almost hear the guitar going, thanks for the oil. It's like the Tin Man on the Wizard of Oz. All right, now looking across, looking for any of those marks I identified earlier. Hey, you know what? I think I put just enough elbow grease in. Look, oh, well, I don't know. Let's take a Q-tip. I may have missed a spot. No, that's pretty clean. Fret 12 usually is dirty, but it looks like I got most of the areas that I identified. Do a quick little visual check here. And I'm going from memory as I inspected this. These are the areas right in here where I found a lot of grime and buildup. You can see I'm pulling some dirt off with the swab. Yeah, I think I got it. Okay, so we're done brushing on the oil. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply one kind of a thinnish coat of oil. I'm not going to glob it on like before, but maybe like 1 dot per fret. Rub it in with the brush and just kind of use the brush to spread it around, and I'm going to let it sit. We're going to let that sit for a bit of time, probably about 20 minutes or so. Let the fretboard drink in that oil, and then we're going to kind of wipe it down a little bit and have a look at that luster. All right. Okay, so I like to call that the conditioning oiling step. The first was all about cleaning. Now we're just going to leave, and I'm going to get in tight so you can see there's a pretty good coating of oil on there. There's a sheen, it's quite wet. We're going to let this soak in for just a few minutes. And you know, probably 10, 15, 20 minutes is plenty. And then we're going to blot and then gently kind of wipe with the grain, clean this up a little bit, and then we should have what looks like a nice, clean, new fretboard. Back in just a moment. Well, about 15 minutes has elapsed, and as you can see, some of this wood, or this oil rather, has soaked in. It's pooled up in other spots, which is a pretty good indicator that the fretboard's saying, "Ooh, I've had enough." So I'm going to begin blotting this. I want to talk a little bit more about the oil used here. You want to make sure and know what your fretboard is made of. This is a rosewood fretboard, which is common. Kind of the three most common ones you'll find is rosewood, maple, and ebony. You want to make sure that whatever oil you use is safe to use on those three. It should say so on the label. If it doesn't, you might want to ask or try a different brand because you know, certain woods behave differently. They've got different grains, different properties. This oil that I used, this F1 oil, specifically states that it is safe for rosewood, maple, or ebony. And again, unless you're dealing with, you know, like you may have a neck that's made of carbon fiber or something crazy like that, that's a whole different discussion. You know, these guitars that we are dealing with are wooden. I'm going to fold over and get a, so I'm not putting oil on oil. But you want to make sure and check your oil and make sure that it is safe for use for the fretboard material that you have on your axe. Wow, look how nice this looks. I forget how satisfying this process is because it really takes years off of an old guitar and really makes it look terrific. So we'll go ahead and finish blotting this, and we'll do a little bit of a wipe, and we'll do one last check to make sure I didn't miss any dirt. Well, we've got her back up on the fret rest now, and now we're going to just do a gentle wiping with the grain, just right down the fretboard. Again, not pressing too hard, just picking up excess oil, kind of wiping toward the center. And you can see we're picking up, but see how clean it is? We're not getting a lot of dirt off, which is nice. That's what we don't want to see, because hopefully we lifted most of it off with our brush. Now, what I'm going to do, take a Q-tip and go along the frets. And let's get a clean one. Go along the frets, the nut here, and that will soak up the oil that has pooled along the frets, and can also expose some spots that you might have missed. Now, don't worry about getting this completely dry. Here's why. Because after you do this and it sets overnight, most of this excess oil will soak right on in. One word of caution, after you do this, I would wait at least 24 hours before you string it up. Because you don't want, you know, these oils to get on your strings and, you know, give you kind of an oily finger situation. Because this oil is free of any waxes or anything, it should never be tacky. You know, you won't have that kind of tacky feeling that you'll get with an oil that you shouldn't use. This should really just kind of disappear and should just leave a nice, you know, new looking, frankly, fretboard behind. So we're just going to kind of dry excess oil again, go with the grain down here, and any of that oil that's like, no, I'm going to stick around, I'm going to stay in these little grain grooves, just let it stay, because it's going to soak right on in and you know, provide some of that nourishment that wood needs. I mean, you know, you wax your furniture, don't you? Your fine wood furniture, you know, you use a furniture polish or, you know, not a wax, but an oil. Sometimes you wax. You don't want to wax this. And then, as your Q-tip gets kind of saturated, pick you up a dry one and keep on working your way down. All right, one last thing, some of the oil will have run down the sides of the fretboard. So you might just want to kind of dab here. And by the way, this oil will not harm the lacquer finish on the body. It will smudge, but when we finish with the guitar and do a final kind of detailing, we'll apply some of that good Dunlop polish and polish up this finish here. So don't worry about that for right now. This stuff's designed for guitars, so safe to use around guitars. Look at that. What a difference. I love it. Looks really, really fantastic. Okay, well, let's have a look at our Harmony neck here. Just kind of let the light play with that. Look at that. Oh, that's a good shot. Look at that rich color coming back. I just love doing this. I'm reminded every time that I clean and oil one of these old fretboards that this instrument has a lot of life left in it. And they get dull and they get dirty because, let's face it, we buy these things to play, not to rub and clean on them. It's like I have a friend who's into classic cars and he keeps them clean, but he buys them to drive. And these guitars are born to drive, at least on the Guitar Foster Parent, they are. So we're going to let this oil, as I mentioned, soak in probably for several days. Just let it soak. Every once in a while, we'll kind of give it a general wiping with a nice soft shop towel and let it kind of, pick up any excess. Some of the frets will say, I've had enough. Some will keep on soaking. If we see any dry spots develop over the next few days, like little spots that look kind of dry or they've lost some of the color, we may go in with another little shot of oil, give it another shot. Give it that nice rich texture and color all the way across all of the frets. Well, what are we going to do next time? We have several things on our list. Let's talk about those now. One thing I mentioned earlier is we are going to be replacing the input jack on this guitar with a nice new multi-point jack. That'll require some soldering. The rest of the electronics in the guitar work fine. We're going to keep the pickups. We'll do some detail cleaning around them. They're really pretty clean. The pots sound nice and clean. The wiring all looks good inside. And so we're just going to replace this input jack. It's kind of dirty, and I'm going to put a multi-point jack in there as well. And then a bit of good news. I mentioned on an earlier episode that I believe that this strap hook down here was stripped because it was loose and I couldn't get it to tighten up like I wanted. Well, I removed it to kind of have a look and see. And as it turns out, the screw was not threaded correctly. When I backed it out and threaded it, you can see it's nice and snug. I've tested it. I've tried to get it to break loose and wiggle. So we won't have to do anything here. It's in good shape. The felt pad is still there. And so we'll leave the original strap hook on the bottom of the guitar. So that's something that we're not going to have to do. So that is very good news indeed. So next time on the Guitar Foster Parent, we'll remove the pick guard and we'll tackle soldering on a new multi-point input jack. We'll talk all about how to do that and the best way to solder. And I'll show you kind of a cool tool I got for soldering these guitars that'll make it easier than the last time I attempted it with the OG bass. Hopefully we'll get some neater solders here and it'll be a little bit less trouble. Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Guitar Foster Parent. Again, I invite you to join us by clicking on the subscribe button on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Come on aboard. I'm not going to send you emails or beg you for money or anything like that. I just want you to come on along and enjoy as we learn together on how to bring these wonderful instruments out of the closet and back into the community of musicians. And by the way, the comment section is important. If you have any ideas for this guitar or any future instruments we may foster and acquire, or if you know a deserving home that might love to own this guitar, we're going to be donating it to a home that will play it and take good care of it. The only requirement is it's not going to go in a closet and be unloved and unplayed. It's going to make music like it was designed to do. So if you'd like to nominate somebody, you can put them in the comments below, or if you'd like to make it private, you can send me an email at john@guitarfosterparent.com. That's john@guitarfosterparent.com. Please like this video, subscribe like I said. You can click the button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and click the bell if you'd like to be notified of future videos. Our next task again will be to get this input jack squared away. coming up next time on the Guitar Foster Parent. We'll see you then.